Okay, forms or HTML forms. So when we have HTML, remember we had tags that allow us to create content, right? So we had tags to create the page content. We have tags like p, like div, like h1, uh, button, or anchor tags, right? Other tags include table. Any other tag that you remember? Any other HTML tag? Which one? Which one? Strong. It's for. Oh, you mean 2, 6. So yeah, there is a lot of tags that we can use to basically create content and structure that content, right? And but in that sense, we only have content that is pretty much static. We are basically transmitting information to the user, right? But what if the user wants to send some information to us, right? And for that, we have HTML forms. Now, to create HTML forms, we have another set of tags that we can use. The most important one is the form tag, okay? So when we want to create a form, basically a form is a way to allow the user to enter some information, and then when they click a button, right, submit or send the information, all that information will be captured somehow, and it will be sent to the server, okay? So for that, we use the form tag. Now the form tag, what I'm saying is the main tag is because we have to wrap all of our form in that tag. And it's a non-visual tag. That means that you cannot style it, right? It's just there for semantics, for the behavior of capturing all the information and send it to a server. Now, the form tag has several attributes. One is the method attribute, right? We have two options here. We have post, we have get, right? There's two ways to send information. I think by default we should use always post. That's the default way to send information to the backend. We can see the difference later. And the other one is action. And action is the URL or the server where we're going to capture that information and send it to, right? So if we have a server in the API, right? So this means that when we capture this information, that information for that contact form will be sent to this URL, the API contact path. It could be actually a full URL. It could be something like myapp.com/API contact, something like that, right? So you can capture the information. Now, what information is captured and sent? By the way, remember I said you have to wrap the whole form inside that form tag, right? So everything that you put inside can be captured. Now, what do we capture? We use the input tag. Now, the input tag is a tag that allows me to create something like you've probably seen it before. It's like a capture area, like a text area where the user can enter some information, right? And that's the input tag. Now, the input tag has some attributes as well. The main attribute is the type, because of course the user will be allowed to enter different types of information. There is a lot of types that we can use. The regular one is text. That means anything could be entered. But you can also have like tel for telephone, number if you want to enter numbers, emails if you want to enter emails, password. If you want to make an input when you're writing the information, it's putting asterisks instead of it's not showing the text, right? Now, why is this type important? Well, for the password type, it's pretty obvious. You don't want the password to be visible. Now, but what about this one, email? Shouldn't be email and text kind of like the same, right? Because they are both text, and email is basically text. So what's the difference between text and email? What do you think is the difference?
Email's gonna look for the at symbol and the dot or something.
Yeah, kind of. I think the main difference is that when you are using that input in a mobile device, the keyboard will show the add symbol. So it will be easier. The same as if you put a number and you put that in a mobile device, it will be the numbers keyboard. And even if you put telephone, it's a different numbers keyboard because it will have the symbol for telephone, like the plus sign and the I think the other one is the dash, right? So the keywords will basically indicate, so that's kind of like an indication of what type of input you are expecting in that form, right? There's actually a bunch of them. It's actually a range that changes completely this input. Now it becomes like a slider that you can use to select a value, right? A numeric value, the same. So yeah, you can have different types here. Now the other properties that you have here is name. And this is the property that we use to identify what is the data that we're going to capture. For example, if I'm making a contact form, you know, most pages have a contact form somewhere, I might say, okay, give me the name, give me your name. And if I want to enter the email, I would use email. And there is other types that we can use to allow the user enter information. One of those are, oh, by the way, there is another input type that's really important, is checkbox. Okay, checkbox is the one that has like a check mark, right? And there is another one that is really important, is the radio. And this one, you have to use it in conjunction. So this one is the one that is checkbox. You can, let's put an example here. What can be, okay, is customer. So a checkbox is something that you can select, right? It's kind of like, I mean, let me see if I can draw. I'm trying to draw. So it's something like this. It will have like a square, and then you can have like a check mark over there, right? That's the checkbox. But the thing is that you can put many checkboxes, and all of them will be set terms, and all of them might be checked, right, individually. Now, the radio, in the other hand, works like this. You can say, let's say state, or maybe not state. Let's do let's do gender value female. Okay, so this radio type or this radio input will work like a single selector. It's basically, you probably seen it before. It's like like a circle, and you can only pick one of those, right? And notice that I'm drawing the radius, but the radius doesn't have any labels next to it, right? Because the thing is that inputs don't have labels, right? The input is just the component or the tag, is the element where you pick, you select, right? The checkbox, the input, but it doesn't include the label. There is another tag for labels. So yeah, and there is actually two other tags that we can use. One is the text area. Let's call this info. Or let's call it message. Right? Text area is another tag that we can use. And do you remember what's the other tag? Do you remember the other tag that we can use for forms?
Pull down?
It's like a pull down, yeah, exactly. So the tag for that is called select. Select. Now the select, you can say, okay, let's say state. Now the way you put the options of the select is by using another tag called option. And every option will have a value. Let's say this is FL and 40. I will add only 2. Okay, so that's the other tag that we can use, select. So basically all the forms are a combination of this, of tags, the form tag that wraps a lot of inputs and selects and checkbox and radios and text area, right? Now, as I said before, this doesn't include labels, okay? So there is another tag that we can use for labeling our inputs, and that's the tag label. Now, the correct way to use the label is to always identify and always match the label with the input. And to be able to do that, we need to create an ID on the input. Like for example, this should be the name tag. So in the label, I can do HTML4 equals name. If someone sees someone correct me if this is the right attribute because I don't remember exactly. I think it's HTML4 or maybe 4. Just 4. It's just 4? 4? Yeah. In React it's HTML4, but in HTML, basic HTML, it's just 4. So you have to match the name with the ID, the 4 attribute of the label with the ID attribute of the input, right? In inputs, this behavior basically will allow you to, for example, in the checkbox, when you have a label, let's add an ID here, is customer. By the way, I'm using the same ID and name, right? The name has a different purpose of ID, but they can be the same. That's why I'm using name is customer, ID is customer. You will see the reason why now. So the label here will be label for this customer, and then I say is the you customer. Okay. Now the reason for the label and the reason to match the label is that, for example, in this case, the checkbox, right? It will draw this component. Will be drawn something like this. It will be a square for the checkbox, and next to the square will be are you customer, right? Because that's what the label is showing, right? You see it over there. You can style the labels. That's a tag that you can style. By the way, you can also style the inputs. The thing that you cannot style is the form, remember. Now, the thing for tagging or just matching the label and the input is because you can click on the label and it will have the behavior of the input, right? So if you click here on "Are you customer?", then the check mark will be checked. If you don't match them, so if you don't put "for is customer" and "ID is customer", then if you click here, then nothing will happen because it doesn't know what is the input that this label is pointing to, right? And that happens the same with radios. So you want to have labels that actually implements the same behavior as the input. You have to have different IDs for every label and the same ID for the input, right? On inputs like this, the one for the name, the thing that happens is that when you click on that label, the input gets focused, right? So for example, the one that says name, right? It will be something like this, right? You see label for name, and the label is name, and then next to it is the text, the input. Now, when you click on the name, on the label, the input gets automatically focused, right? That's the important part of making the label match the input, okay? And that's essentially forms. That's nothing else that forms. Now, of course, there is no restrictions on how you lay it out inside. So you can have a form that has, like for example, you see in these credit card forms, right? When you put your name and then you put the credit card number and then you put the expiration and next to it you put the security code, right? So you can style it, you can lay it out however you want, that doesn't matter. What happens is, in the form, at the end of the form, or somewhere in the form, you should put a button of type submit, right? Send info. Now, this button, notice that it says type submit. It's a different type of button. It's visually the same as a type button. The other type here is button, right? But this is type submit. That means that when you click this button, all this information that the user entered in every one of the fields, all the information will be captured, right? And will be sent to that URL. The way it's going to be sent and the way it's going to be captured is by the names. So every input has a name. So for example, I have the name here. This is the email. This is customer. This one is gender. And this one is message. And then we have state. So it will be a form. And the information will be captured as name. I don't know, whatever. John Doe. Email. John. I'm just making this data, of course. And then it comes the is customer. Usually this will be on and off depending if you check the box or not. And then we have gender. If the user selected one of the radios, then that's the one. That's the value that will be sent, right? So if the user selected the second one, it will be gender male. And then whatever message. And then we have state. Depending on what the user selected, right? If the user didn't select that, then it will not be sent. Depending on the browser, sometimes it will be sent a null value. But I think most of the browsers, when you don't select the value, it will just be undefined, so it will not send it, right? Now let's assume that we are putting all the information. So this is the information. This blob of data is going to be packaged somehow. We're going to learn this later, and it will be sent to this URL. Boom. And that URL should decide what to do with that information. Okay, so that's a form in a nutshell. And this is important. Why? Because most web applications, if not all web applications, have only two purposes: show information to the user, capture information from the user. That's all, right? So that's what we do in web development. We show information or we capture information, okay? And it's really important capturing the information, because like I seen, like, this is a contact form, but you can make it as complex. Like you're probably seeing online, you've seen this, I don't know, if you go to Progressive and you try to get your own insurance, right? It has a bunch of questions, and every question is a input, and it's a form, and it can be really long and complex, right? So you can make it as complex as, you know, insurance application. Questions? No? Cool. Well, that's a recap of forms. Of course, it's very brief. We will use it later. Let me stop this here.